Lena moved quickly between the tables, balancing a tray in one hand and a basket of warm bread in the other. It was the dinner rush again, and the restaurant was already buzzing with conversation, clinking glasses, and soft music playing from hidden speakers on the ceiling. She had been working at this place for almost a year, and even though she had memorized the routines, every night still felt like a marathon she had to finish with a smile. She tried not to let her tiredness show. Most guests were kind enough, or at least polite, but there were always a few who talked down to her as if she wasn't a real person. She knew it came with the job, so she reminded herself to breathe and stay calm. It wasn't forever, she told herself. Just for now. The restaurant was known for its elegant interior, soft golden lighting, dark wooden tables, and a glossy old piano in the corner that no one touched anymore. It used to be played on weekends by a hired musician, but the owners cut that expense long ago. Now the piano sat quietly like an ornament, collecting dust but still shining under the lights. Sometimes, when the restaurant was nearly empty, Lena would glance at that piano and feel a little pinch in her chest. It reminded her of the life she once tried to build, a life filled with music lessons, early morning practices, and dreams she carried like a delicate glass thing. She had wanted to become a pianist since she was a child. She had even gotten accepted into a music program farther in the city. But life did not ask what she wanted. Bills needed to be paid. Her family needed her. Dreams could wait, everyone said. But sometimes she wondered if they waited too long. Would they turn into something else, something painful? Even so, she never let go of the melodies inside her. When she was washing dishes in the back, she would hum softly. When she walked home at night, she tapped invisible keys on her thigh. Music lived in her like a heartbeat. She just tried not to show it too much at work, afraid someone might mock her or think she was strange. Tonight felt like any other night until the doors opened for a group that always changed the atmosphere the moment they arrived. A tall man in a tailored gray suit stepped inside first, followed by 3 others dressed with the same level of expensive confidence. People whispered when they recognized him. Some even sat up straighter. God, it was Mr. Alden, one of the city's well-known millionaires. He owned several companies and was always seen at big events with important people. To Lena, he was just another customer, but the staff had learned from past experience that he enjoyed being noticed and admired. He liked when people treated the room with a bit of caution around him. Lena straightened her apron as they walked in. She placed the bread basket on a table and went to greet them with the same polite, professional tone she used for everyone. "Good evening. Welcome. Would you like your usual table?" He smiled, but not warmly. It was the kind of smile that showed confidence, but also made people feel small, as if he knew something they didn't. "Yes, the usual," he said. Waving his hand slightly, his group followed him to the private corner table near the piano. Of course, it was his favorite spot. Not because he liked the piano, but because he liked being able to see the whole restaurant from there. It gave him a sense of control. Lena handed them menus and went to get their waters. As she walked, she heard them laughing loudly about some business deal. Their voices rose above the others in the room. She didn't pay attention, but she did hear one of them mention easy money, and she wondered what that kind of life felt like. To her, even 100 extra rupees made a difference. When she returned to their table, she placed the glasses gently, trying not to disturb their conversation. But as she leaned forward, one of them asked loudly, "Hey, isn't that the girl who hums all the time?" Lena froze for a heartbeat. She hadn't realized anyone noticed. Mr. Alden lifted his eyes, curiosity and amusement mixing on his face. "You hum?" he asked, as if it was a detail he wanted to examine for entertainment. "It's just a habit," she replied softly. "Sometimes when I'm working, I don't even notice." "What kind of songs do you hum?" another man asked. "Pop songs?" Or whatever plays on the radio. Lena shook her head. No, just small melodies. Oh, you mean like piano pieces, someone said with a smirk. Do you play? Her chest tightened. She didn't want this attention. Not like this. She felt their eyes waiting for her answer. I used to, she said carefully. A long time ago. Mr. Alden leaned back in his chair, glancing at the piano beside him. His eyes lit up with a spark that never meant anything good. You used to play? He repeated. Well, that's interesting. He tapped the piano lightly with one finger. So tell me, are you any good? She gave a small, unsure smile, trying to move past this conversation. I don't know anymore. It's been many years. Oh, come on, he said, sitting forward. Music is like riding a bike, isn't it? You don't forget. A couple of people at nearby tables were already watching. They sensed something unfolding. Lena wished the floor would swallow her. I just work here, she reminded him politely. I don't think. He cut her off. I think you should show us. The other men chuckled, leaning in as if this was their evening's entertainment. She grew uneasy. Sir, I'm on shift. And the piano isn't even used. He rested his elbows on the table, staring at her with that same smug smile. Exactly. What a waste to have a piano sitting here when someone with talent is walking around holding plates. Lena felt the insult, though it was wrapped in fake curiosity. She stayed calm. I can't really play in front of customers. It's not part of my job. Oh? Then I dare you. The room seemed to pause. A dare from a man like him was never innocent. It was always a test of power, a test of pride. His friends leaned back, enjoying the tension. Lena's manager, standing a few steps away, stepped forward. Sir, we don't ask our staff to perform. Mr. Alden raised a hand, silencing him. I'm not asking. I'm simply offering a moment of fun. No harm, right? The manager looked at Lena helplessly. He couldn't push her, but he also knew how important customers like this were to the restaurant. Lena swallowed. She hated being put in this position. If she refused, they would laugh. If she agreed, they would laugh if she made even the tiniest mistake. Either way, she was entertainment to them. She looked at the piano. Her chest fluttered with mixed feelings. Fear, embarrassment, longing, anger. She remembered the last time she played properly. She remembered sitting in a classroom with other young musicians, her heart full of hope. She remembered leaving it all behind when her family needed money. She remembered dreams that still whispered to her. The room was quiet now. People had noticed the exchange. Some diners turned their heads subtly, trying to look without being obvious. Mr. Alden tilted his head. Well, can you play? Or were those melodies just in your imagination? Something inside her shifted. A small spark of courage, or maybe frustration. She had swallowed her pride so many times in her life that she no longer recognized where it began or ended. But right now, she felt something telling her she didn't have to shrink. She took a breath. If I play, she said slowly, it won't be for fun. His eyebrows rose. Then for what? For myself. He chuckled. That works too. She could feel her hands trembling slightly. Still, she walked toward the piano. Each step felt heavy, but also strangely freeing. She wiped a bit of dust off the lid and lifted it gently. The keys looked old but still clean, like a memory she wasn't ready to see again. She sat down on the bench. Her back straightened almost automatically. Years of training settled around her like an old coat she'd forgotten she owned. She placed her fingers on the keys, feeling the cool surface. Her heart pounded so loudly, she wondered if people could hear it. Behind her, some whispers rose. Someone said, "Is she really going to play?" Another person said, "She looks nervous." And someone else murmured, "I hope she doesn't embarrass herself." But in that moment, Lena pushed those voices away. She closed her eyes softly and tried to find the melody. Inside her, the one she always hummed when she thought no one was listening. It wasn't a famous piece. It wasn't something from a music book. It was hers. Something she created years ago. Something she kept safe. She pressed the first key gently. A soft note filled the room. She pressed another, then another, and soon a delicate melody flowed through the restaurant, like warm light weaving through cool air. Her fingers moved slowly at first, careful, afraid they might stumble. But the more she played, the more she drifted into the world she thought she lost forever, the world of music, of imagination, of quiet feelings spoken through sound. The restaurant grew silent. Even the kitchen noise seemed to fade. People turned fully now, not just glancing. They watched her, surprised, then transfixed. The melody grew stronger, fuller. It carried a mix of hope and sadness, the kind of sadness that feels honest, not heavy. Some people leaned forward to listen better. A young couple stopped talking altogether. A man set down his fork quietly. Mr. Alden's smile faded. He did not expect this. He expected a nervous, clumsy attempt, something he could joke about later. He expected light entertainment. But what he heard was something else entirely: raw emotion turned into music by someone who clearly carried more in her heart than he ever asked to. Understand. As Lena's fingers moved more confidently across the keys, she felt the old spark return. Her mind drifted to the time she practiced for hours, the teachers who encouraged her, the dreams that once fell. Lena kept her hands on the piano keys for a moment longer, almost afraid to look up. The last note she played still echoed softly in her mind, and she wasn't ready to return to the world of plates, orders, and curious eyes. For a few seconds, she let her fingers rest there, as if letting go too fast would break something delicate inside her. But eventually, she had to face the room. She slowly turned her head and saw what she least expected: silence, so complete that even the soft clatter of dishes from the kitchen had stopped. Every face she could see was turned toward her, not with amusement or judgment, but with quiet surprise. It made her heart beat even faster. She stood up quickly, brushing her palms against her apron, trying to slip back into the role of a waitress, not a performer. She didn't want to make a big deal out of it. She only wanted to get back to her work before she caused any trouble. But the moment she stepped away from the piano, the room suddenly came back to life. A few people started clapping gently. Then more joined in. The sound grew louder, spreading like a wave through the restaurant. Chairs scraped softly as some guests sat straighter, clapping with honest admiration. Lena froze. She didn't know where to look. Her cheeks warmed. She wasn't used to attention, not this kind. She wasn't sure what to do: smile, bow, or just walk away. Before she could decide, someone near the front said, "That was beautiful." Another voice added, "You should play here more often." Lena shook her head shyly and gave a small, grateful smile, but she still felt uncertain, almost overwhelmed. She didn't want people to think she was trying to show off. She didn't even want to play in the first place. She had only done it because she felt pushed, and because something inside her wanted to reclaim a part of herself. Her manager stood by the counter, staring at her with wide eyes full of surprise and confusion. He didn't look angry, just stunned. He didn't expect any of this, and neither did she. But the applause died quickly when Mr. Alden stood up from his chair. The tone of the room shifted the moment he moved. His presence carried weight, and people sensed it. Some of the clapping faded when they noticed he wasn't joining in. His expression was unreadable, neither smiling nor frowning, but clearly affected by what he'd heard. She felt her stomach twist. She didn't know if he was upset, impressed, or planning to turn this into another scene. She braced herself. He took a slow step forward, adjusting his suit jacket as he approached her. His friends stayed seated, watching him with the same kind of curiosity the rest of the restaurant had. Lina took a small breath. She reminded herself that she had done nothing wrong. She played because he dared her. But still, she felt nervous. When he reached her, he looked down at the piano bench, then at her hands, then finally into her eyes. "Well," he said in a voice much quieter than before, "that was unexpected." She didn't know how to respond, so she stayed quiet and lowered her gaze. "You didn't tell us you could play like that," he continued. "I didn't think it mattered," she replied softly. He gave a short, dry laugh. "It does. It certainly does." His words weren't mean, but they weren't kind either. They were confused, shaken, like someone forced to rethink something they believed. She stood still, waiting for whatever came next. One of his business partners called from the table. "She's better than the guy we hired last month for that event." Another added, "She should be on stage somewhere, not carrying plates." Their comments only made her feel more uncomfortable. She didn't want to be the center of attention. She just wanted to work quietly, finish her shift, go home, and breathe again. Mr. Alden placed one hand on the back of a chair and leaned slightly. "Tell me," he said, "where did you learn to play like that?" Lina hesitated. "I studied for a while, but I stopped." "Why?" She bit her lip for a moment. She didn't owe him her story, but she also didn't want to sound rude. "Life got in the way," she answered gently. "I had to help my family." Mr. Alden nodded slowly, as if absorbing that. His expression softened without him meaning to let it show. He looked toward the piano again, then back at her. "You've got real talent. Not the kind people pretend to see. The real kind. The kind you can't teach." She didn't know what to say. Compliments from someone like him felt heavy, like they carried expectations she wasn't ready for. "Thank you," she said simply, because it was the only thing she could think of. He stayed quiet for a moment, as if deciding something inside his mind. His friends whispered to each other behind him, but he kept his eyes on her. She stepped back a little. "I should get back to serving tables," she said softly. "People still need their meals." Her manager nodded at her from the distance, giving her silent permission to return to work. But he also gave her a small look of encouragement, the kind he used rarely. As she walked away from the piano, her hands still felt shaky. She grabbed a tray from the counter and headed toward one of the tables that had been waiting patiently. The guests there smiled warmly at her. "You play beautifully," one of them said. Before she could speak, "Thank you," she replied. Quietly, she took their orders and tried to focus on the tasks she knew, well, writing down dishes, asking about allergies, checking if they needed more water. But her mind kept drifting back to the moment at the piano, to the look on people's faces, to the unexpected stillness that filled the restaurant. She had become used to blending into the background wherever she went. She didn't expect to stand out, and she didn't want to. Yet here she was, suddenly at the center of attention, even if just for a moment. She carried food to the kitchen and returned with another tray, trying to keep her steps steady. But everywhere she went, someone had something to say. Couple near the window told her they hoped she would play again. Someday. A table of older guests said her music reminded them of a small concert they once attended. Someone else asked if she had recordings online. Shook her head each time, still shy, still unsure how to handle so many compliments at once. But not all reactions were warm. Near the back of the room, a man whispered to his friend, "Why didn't she say she could do that? Why pretend to be a waitress when she's obviously trained?" It wasn't meant to be cruel, but it stung. She wasn't pretending to be anything. She was working because she had to. Because life didn't give her many options, she pushed that thought away and kept moving, doing her best to stay focused on her job. Meanwhile, at the table near the piano, Mr. Alden watched her more closely than before. He wasn't smiling the way he had earlier when he expected entertainment. Now his expression was thoughtful, even conflicted. Each time she walked past his table, she felt his gaze follow her. Though she tried not to look in his direction. At one point, he raised his hand slightly to get her attention. She approached carefully. "Yes, sir?" "Sit for a moment," he said, gesturing to the empty chair beside him. She blinked in surprise. "I'm still working." "You can spare 1 minute," he insisted. She looked toward her manager, who hesitated, then gave a small nod. So she sat, slowly with her hands folded on her lap. "I want to ask you something," he said. She waited. "If you had the chance to play again," he said, "for real, would you take it?" She felt her heart tighten. She didn't know how to answer that question. It wasn't simple. It wasn't something she could respond to casually in the middle of a shift. "I don't know," she said softly. He leaned back. "You should think about it." She nodded, unsure where the conversation was going. She didn't want promises. She didn't want to owe him anything. But she also didn't want to dismiss something that might lead somewhere. Before she could say anything else, someone from another table called her name. She stood up quickly. "I need to get back to work." "Of course," he said. She walked away with a faster step, relieved to escape the pressure of his attention. But the night wasn't over yet. Although the restaurant slowly returned to its usual rhythm, people kept talking about her performance. Some quietly, some openly. The piano in the corner, once ignored, now felt like a spotlight that refused to dim. She tried to collect plates, refill glasses, and deliver checks as if nothing had happened. But inside, she felt shaken. Not in a bad way, more like a window that had been shut for years finally cracked open, letting in a rush of fresh air. She didn't know how to breathe, yet by the time the dinner rush began to slow down, she felt exhausted, not physically, but emotionally, as if her heart had been running a long race she didn't prepare for. She went to the back room to catch her breath. A coworker looked at her with wide eyes. "That was incredible," he whispered. "Where did you learn to play like that?" She shrugged. She didn't want to repeat the story. It felt personal. "Well," he said, "you changed the whole mood tonight." She smiled faintly. "I didn't mean to." "Maybe not," he replied, "but you did." When she walked out again, she saw Mr. Alden standing near the counter, speaking with the manager. They both turned when they saw her. The manager stepped aside respectfully, giving them space. Mr. Alden looked at her with a strange expression, not arrogant, not mocking, but something deeper. "This isn't over," he said quietly. She didn't know what he meant, but she had a feeling her life was about to change, and not slowly, not gently, but in ways she never expected, and she wasn't sure if she was ready, but part of her hoped she was. The next morning, Lena woke up earlier than she needed to, long before her alarm rang. She lay still in her small room, listening to the faint sounds of traffic outside and the soft hum of the ceiling fan. Her mind felt full, not with stress, but with thoughts that had been spinning since the moment she left the restaurant the night before. She couldn't forget the silence in the room when she finished playing. She couldn't forget the applause, the warm faces, or the way the music made her feel alive, open, and almost like herself again. But she also couldn't forget the unsettled look in Mr. Alden's eyes when he said, "This isn't over." She didn't know what he meant. The words rolled around in her head, making her anxious, even though he didn't sound threatening. He only sounded certain, like someone who made decisions with confidence and expected others to follow. She sat up slowly and rubbed her eyes. She needed to focus on her day, not yesterday. She had bills to pay, errands to run, and another shift in the evening. She couldn't afford to daydream. Not now. She got dressed, made herself tea, and stepped out into the cool morning air. The streets weren't busy yet. She walked past the bakery that always smelled like warm bread, past the bookstore she loved but rarely entered, and past the bus stop where she sometimes watched musicians perform on weekends. She paused there for a moment, remembering the times she thought about joining them, but never did. Music still lived inside her, but she had learned to keep it in the quiet corners of her life, where it couldn't interfere with her responsibilities. When she reached the restaurant later that afternoon, everything looked the same door she pushed open, the same warm lights, the same wooden tables waiting for guests. But she felt different, as if the piano performance had shaken something loose inside her that she couldn't put back. A coworker greeted her at the door. "You ready for round 2? He asked with a grin. "What do you mean?" She asked, confused. "You think people forgot?" He laughed softly. "Half the neighborhood is talking about what you did last night. I heard 2 customers this morning asking if the piano waitress would be here today." Her cheeks warmed instantly. "Please don't call me that." "It's not a bad thing," he said. "People really liked it." She didn't respond. She wasn't used to attention, and she wasn't sure she wanted it. She walked toward the back to store her bag and put on her apron. When she returned to the dining area, she noticed the piano right away. It looked exactly as it did before, silent, polished, almost ignored, but now it felt like a spotlight she didn't ask for. Her manager approached her with an uncertain smile. "You all right?" he asked gently. "Yes," she said. "Just a bit tired." He nodded. "I've been thinking about what happened yesterday. The customers loved it. Really loved it." She didn't answer. "But don't worry," he added quickly. "I'm not asking you to play again. I know you are pushed into it. I don't want you to feel like you have to do that to keep your job." Relief washed through her. "Thank you," she said quietly. He gave her a reassuring pat on the shoulder before returning to the counter. She felt grateful. He wasn't perfect, but he understood her better than she expected. But the peace didn't last long. About an hour into her shift, the restaurant door opened, and she felt the room shift before she even turned to look. A familiar silence spread across a few tables. A few guests looked up with interest. She didn't want to believe it was him, but when she looked, she saw Mr. Alden standing tall in the doorway, dressed sharply as usual. He walked in with the same confidence he had the night before, though this time he wasn't surrounded by his friends. He was alone. That made the moment feel even heavier. Her heart dropped. She hoped he came for dinner like any other guest. She hoped he just wanted a quiet meal and wouldn't bring up the performance or the conversation they had. She didn't want more pressure, more questions, or more expectations. She grabbed a notepad and took a deep breath before walking to his table. She kept her voice steady. "Good evening," she said softly. "Would you like a menu?" He looked up at her with a calm, unreadable expression. "No menu," he said. "Just a bit of your time, if that's all right." She felt a mix of discomfort and curiosity. "I'm working," she reminded him politely. "I know," he said, "but this won't take long." She didn't sit, but she stayed. "What do you need?" He clasped his hands on the table. "I came to apologize." The words caught her by surprise. She wasn't expecting that. Not from him. She blinked, unsure how to respond. "I pushed you into something last night," he continued. "I treated it like a game. I shouldn't have done that." She shook her head softly. "It's okay." "No," he said firmly. "You were uncomfortable. I saw that. But you still played, and I made it about my amusement. That wasn't fair to you." She didn't know what to do with the apology. She wasn't angry at him, but she didn't fully trust him either. Still, she appreciated the effort. Not many people like him would take the time to apologize to a waitress. "Thank you," she said. "I appreciate it." He nodded slowly, watching her carefully. But the apology wasn't the only reason he came. "There's something else," he said. "Here it comes," she thought. The part she had been dreading. "I want to ask you something," he said. Not as a dare, not as a joke, as a serious offer. Her breath caught. He leaned forward slightly. "Have you ever thought about playing again? Not just for fun. For real." She swallowed. "Why does that matter?" "Because you're talented," he said plainly. "I don't say that lightly. I've heard professionals play. I've hired them for events. What you did last night wasn't simple. It wasn't luck or nostalgia. It was real skill." The words made her heart flutter, a strange mix of pride and fear. "I don't know," she said quietly. "Life is different now. I can't go back to all that." "You can," he said calmly. "If you want to." She shook her head. "It's not that simple." He tapped a finger lightly on the table. "Maybe not. But sometimes the simplest things are the ones we ignore first." She crossed her arms lightly, not in anger, but for comfort. "Why do you care?" she asked honestly. He paused, thinking before answering. "Because I saw someone with talent working a job that doesn't allow her to use it," he said. "Because I saw someone come alive behind that piano. And because I know how it feels to lose something you once loved." The last sentence surprised her. She didn't expect him to share anything personal. She didn't even know he had a softer side. He continued, "Most people spend their whole lives searching for something they're good at. You already have it. You just walked away." She felt her throat tighten. "I didn't walk away," she whispered. "I had to choose." "I understand," he said gently. "But maybe now you can choose differently." She stood silent, her mind swirling. He reached into his jacket and placed a small card on the table. It was simple: his name, a number, and nothing more. "I'm working on a community project," he said. "A small music initiative for young performers. Nothing too grand. I support schools and local programs. I know people who run workshops, small concerts, and training sessions. If you want to play again, even just to see how it feels, I can help." She stared at the card, unsure if she should even pick it up. He didn't push it toward her. He didn't force it into her hand. He simply placed it there and leaned back. "You don't owe me anything," he said softly. "Think about it. If you decide you're done with music forever, that's fine. But if you feel even a little spark left, call me." She didn't move. He stood up slowly. "I'll leave you to your shift," he said. "Enjoy your evening." He walked toward the exit, but paused before leaving. "And for what it's worth, thank you for the music yesterday." Then he left. Lena stood frozen beside the table long after he was gone. The small card remained exactly where he placed it, as if waiting for her to make the next move. She didn't pick it up right away. She went back to work. She took orders, delivered dishes, cleaned tables, and tried to ignore the heaviness in her chest. But every time she passed his empty chair, her eyes fell on the card again, not by the end of the night. She finally slipped it into her pocket, not because she planned to call, but because leaving it on the table felt wrong. She walked home slowly under the streetlights, thinking about everything. She didn't know what to do. She didn't know if she should trust him. She didn't know if she was ready to face music again. But deep inside, something small and quiet whispered to her, maybe. It was time, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but maybe. When she arrived home, she placed the card on her small desk and stared at it for a long time. The idea of playing again felt scary, exciting, impossible. and hopeful all at once. She lay down on her bed and closed her eyes. Her fingers moved gently in the air, as if playing invisible keys. And for the first time in years, she let herself imagine. What if? Lena stayed seated at the piano for a long moment after the final note faded. Her fingers were still slightly curled above the keys, as if the music had not fully left her hands yet. For a second, she wondered if she had imagined everything. Stillness in the room, the way the space seemed to breathe with her melody, the unexpected softness that had fallen over the guests like a warm blanket. But when she finally lifted her eyes, the truth hit her all at once. The restaurant was silent, not the usual polite silence people gave after background music, but the kind of silence that meant something had reached them deeply. Every face she saw looked different from before. People who moments earlier were laughing loudly, clinking glasses, or scrolling on their phones were now sitting upright, watching her like she had revealed some hidden part of the world to them. Then, suddenly, the silence broke, not with whispers, but with applause. Real applause, loud, full, and warm. It started somewhere near the back, then spread across the room until every hand was clapping. Some guests even stood up, which made Lena freeze again, because she wasn't used to such attention. She had expected maybe a small smile from someone, a nod, a quiet compliment at best. Not this. Not people rising from their seats because of something she had done. Her heartbeat thudded so fast she almost felt dizzy. The sound washed over her and wrapped her in something she hadn't felt in a long time: validation, respect, acceptance, and maybe even a bit of wonder. She blinked quickly. She didn't want to cry in front of strangers, but the emotion sat heavy in her chest. She looked away, trying to hide the way her eyes watered near the center table, the millionaire who had dared her mister. Alden had stopped smiling. His earlier smirk, the one he wore like it was glued to his face, had vanished completely. Instead, he stared at her with a strange expression, not angry, not annoyed, but stunned. Almost shaken. He leaned back, slowly, like he needed a moment to understand what had just happened. Lena didn't know whether that made her proud or nervous. Maybe both. His friends exchanged confused glances. One whispered something like, "I didn't expect that," while another shook his head and muttered, "How is she even working here?" Lena lowered her gaze again. She didn't know what to do with so many eyes on her. Attention, especially praise, felt so foreign now. It was something she used to receive back in music school during recitals, before life had pulled her away. Now it felt like being dropped into a memory she thought she had lost forever. The applause continued for another long moment, until slowly people began returning to their seats, still murmuring to each other with soft excitement. Lena stood carefully, smoothing her apron, trying to collect herself. She wanted to slip away, back to the kitchen, maybe hide behind the counter for a minute and breathe. But she didn't get the chance. A woman from one of the back tables approached her first. She looked to be in her 50s, dressed in a simple coat, not someone who came here often. She touched her chest with one hand and said, "That was beautiful, dear. I haven't felt something like that in years." Lena didn't know how to respond. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice small. Another guest asked, "Where did you learn to play like that?" That was unbelievable. She didn't have time to answer before someone else stepped forward. "Do you perform somewhere? Do you have recordings?" A man asked eagerly, almost too excited. Lena shook her head. "No, I don't. I haven't played anywhere in a long time." It felt strange to admit that, especially after what had just happened. And then she heard slow footsteps, heavy ones, purposeful. When she looked up, Mr. Alden was approaching her. His earlier arrogance was gone, completely gone. His expression was serious now, almost thoughtful. The loud, prideful man who had teased her minutes ago now gave off the feeling of someone searching for the right words. She instinctively stepped back a little, unsure what he wanted. The moment felt too fragile, too unpredictable. "You," he said softly, so softly, she wondered if anyone had ever heard him speak in that tone before. "You didn't tell us you could play like that." Lena tried to keep her voice steady. "You didn't ask." He blinked, taken aback by her simple reply. Then one of his partners spoke up. "That was astonishing. Where did you train?" She hesitated. She didn't like talking about her past, especially not in front of a table of rich men who treated her like an object of entertainment earlier. But lying wasn't her way. "I studied for a while at a music school," she said slowly, "but I had to stop. My family needed me to work." There was a long pause. The partner who had asked the question nodded quietly, almost with respect, as if her answer told him more than just her history. As if it revealed the weight she had carried. Another one said, "You could be performing at events. Why are you working here?" Lena kept her eyes low. Life doesn't always go as planned. She didn't mean it sadly or bitterly, just honestly. Behind her, her manager stood watching. He looked proud, genuinely proud, even though earlier he was terrified of losing customers because of the dare. The other workers peeked from behind counters and kitchen doors, whispering to each other with wide eyes. The whole staff had stopped working for a moment, drawn by the event that had taken over the restaurant. It wasn't every day that a simple waitress turned quiet humiliation into a moment the entire room would remember. Mr. Alden finally spoke again. "I misjudged you," he said. The words sounded uncomfortable coming from him, but real, not forced. That was extraordinary. Lena nodded once, unsure what else to say. He cleared his throat, looking down like he was searching for better words. "I apologize for the way I spoke earlier." That sentence landed strangely in the air. Even his friends looked surprised. Clearly, apologies were not something he gave often, or easily. Lena didn't need the apology to feel validated. The music had already healed something inside her, but hearing it still mattered. "It's all right," she said gently. "I know you weren't expecting much." He shook his head. "Expecting much?" "I wasn't expecting anything." That was not just good. That was, he searched for the word, moving. Lena felt her face warm. Compliments still made her shy. A younger woman at a nearby table stepped in. "You should be on a stage, not carrying plates. Your talent deserves to be seen." Several people murmured in agreement. Lena didn't know how to respond. She wasn't used to people speaking about her like that. A conversation broke out around her guests, asking more questions, telling her how the music made them feel, asking if she had written a piece herself. She nodded, embarrassed but honest. Yes, it was hers. She had made it during a time she didn't tell them about, a time when everything felt heavy, when music was the only thing that kept her spirits alive. The guests were fascinated. Then one man asked quietly, "Why did you stop playing publicly? You could have built a career." Lena looked down again. "Things changed," she said simply. "I needed to earn money fast. The restaurant hired me. And I stayed. That's all." She didn't say that anxiety had made her afraid to return to what she lost. She didn't say that every time she passed a piano, she felt both longing and pain. She didn't say that she thought her dreams had an expiration date. She didn't need to. Her silence filled in the rest. One of the guests, a woman with kind eyes, touched her forearm lightly. "Sometimes life takes you the long way around. It doesn't mean you're done." Lena swallowed hard. The words hit her deeper than she expected. Meanwhile, Mr. Alden remained standing a short distance away, watching this small circle of people form around Lena. His expression kept shifting, thoughtful, impressed, maybe even regretful. For the first time that evening, he felt strangely out of place. almost embarrassed, not because she had played well, but because he had treated her like a joke before realizing how wrong he had been. Eventually, the manager told the guests they could return to their meals, but many kept glancing at Lena with smiles. Some waved at her when she passed by with water or bread. A few called her the pianist, which made her laugh quietly. She didn't mind that nickname got as she worked through the rest of her shift. She felt different, lighter, like something inside her had come alive again. She noticed she was moving a little more freely, smiling a little more simply because her heart felt full dot by the time the night was winding down. Mr. Alden approached her again. This time he didn't come with a crowd. He didn't carry the confidence of a wealthy man. He came alone, quieter, almost unsure. "I've been thinking," he said, keeping his voice low so her coworkers wouldn't overhear. "You shouldn't waste that gift." She nodded, not sure where he was going with this. He exhaled. "I want to talk to you about something. Not as a dare, not as a joke, something serious." Her stomach tightened with nerves. She had no idea what to expect. "I would like," he continued slowly, "to help you return to your music." She stared at him. Stung dot, he raised a hand slightly. "Not because I feel sorry for you. Not at all. It's because you have something rare, something real." Lena felt her breath catch. "I want to sponsor your lessons," he said, "or help you record your music, whatever path you want to take. If you're willing." For a moment, Lena couldn't find any words. Not a single one. The idea was too big, too unexpected, too life-changing for her to process right away. All she could manage was a quiet, "Why?" And for the first time that night, the proud millionaire looked humbled. "Because your music deserved more than a dusty piano in a restaurant," he said softly. "And D." Lena stood there, stunned, as the millionaire's offer hung in the air like something too delicate to touch. She felt as if she had stepped out of her own life and into someone else's. Someone who had opportunities handed to them. Someone who lived in a world where dreams could return after being abandoned. It didn't feel real. It didn't even feel possible. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her hands, still warm from playing the piano earlier, trembled slightly. She hid them by clasping them together. The millionaire, Mr. Alden, seemed to notice her discomfort. For once he didn't rush her. He didn't push or try to impress anyone. He simply stood quietly, waiting, as if he understood the weight of what he had just offered. Finally, Lena found her voice. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't need to decide right now," he replied. "Think about it. Ask questions. Take your time." But that only made her more anxious. People didn't offer things like this without wanting something in return. Life had taught her that nothing came for free, especially not from people who lived in high-rise apartments and ordered waitstaff around like furniture. She took a small step back, creating space between them. "Why would you want to help me?" His eyes shifted, and for a moment he looked almost embarrassed. "Because what I did earlier was wrong," he said quietly. "I judged you before knowing anything about you. And when you played, I realized how blind I was. I was sitting there, thinking money makes people special. But what you did tonight, your music, it was more valuable than anything I could buy." She stared at him again, unsure how to respond. He cleared his throat. "Let me explain. I know people in music schools, in studios. I know investors, artists, event organizers. I can open doors for you, doors that never open for most people." Lena felt even more overwhelmed. "That sounds like a lot," she said softly. "It is," he admitted. "But you deserve it. You just need someone to stand behind you long enough for the world to hear you." His words felt sincere, but sincerity alone wasn't enough to silence the doubt inside her gut. She thought of her family. The rent, the long shifts, the bills, the constant stress. A life of routine and responsibility that didn't have space for big dreams. "I can't just leave my job," she said. "I have responsibilities." "I'm not asking you to quit," he replied. "Not unless you want to. Maybe we start small. A few lessons. A recording session. Something simple." Her chest tightened. "Even that feels too much." He didn't pressure her. That surprised her. "Just think about it," he said softly. "And when you're ready, let me know." Then he slipped a business card into her hand, white, clean, with his name printed in fine gold letters. She stared down at it, almost afraid to touch it. He walked away after that, giving her space. She watched him return to his table, where his friends seemed confused about his sudden change in behavior. They whispered to him, but he shook his head, ignoring their questions. For the rest of the night, Lena moved through the restaurant like she was floating. She served water, cleared tables, smiled when someone smiled at her, but her mind was far away. Every so often, she glanced at the card in her apron pocket, unsure whether it felt like hope or danger. When her shift ended, she didn't linger. She hurried to the staff locker room, hung her apron, grabbed her bag, and stepped out into the cool night air. The street was quiet. Only the hum of distant cars and soft glow of streetlights kept her company. She pulled out the card again. The name, the number, the address. It didn't feel like something meant for her. It felt like something she had accidentally picked up from someone else's life. She walked home with careful steps. Her thoughts tangled so tightly that she could hardly breathe when she reached her apartment at a small place she shared with her aunt, who worked long night shifts she quietly changed into comfortable clothes and sat on the edge of her bed. Everything felt unreal. She replayed the moment when she touched the piano keys, the silence that followed, the applause, and now, this offer. She remembered her childhood, sitting on the floor of her home, watching music recitals on an old television, dreaming of being the girl on the stage someday. She remembered her first piano lesson, her teacher praising her for understanding melodies quicker than most adults. She remembered the excitement of school performances. And then she remembered the day she had to leave music school, the day she packed her books in a small bag, wiping tears quietly so nobody would hear her. Life had been punishing after that. Responsibility had replaced her dreams. Work had replaced her joy. So why did one song, played on a dusty piano in a busy restaurant, suddenly bring all of it back? She leaned her head back and sighed deeply. She didn't want to make a decision out of fear, but she also didn't want to jump into something she couldn't trust. She lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come. Instead, memories of melodies she had forgotten years ago filled her thoughts like a quiet reawakening. The next morning, she woke up groggy but determined to keep her mind clear. She went to work as usual, tying her hair back, washing her hands, taking a deep breath before stepping into the dining area. But something felt different today, the moment she walked in. The kitchen staff clapped lightly for her. Some grinning, others teasing, but all clearly proud. Her manager patted her shoulder and said, "You stunned the whole place last night. I've been telling the owner to let you play sometimes. Maybe he'll listen now." Lena blushed and shook her head. "It was just one song that made a whole room quiet," he replied. She smiled shyly, but continued working. Her coworkers kept bringing up the performance. Some asked if she planned to play again. Others encouraged her to consider the Millionaire's offer. The conversations made her nervous. During a short break, she stepped outside to breathe. Her hands were cold from the January air, but she didn't mind. She needed clarity. She took out the card again. It felt slightly bent from being in her apron pocket all morning. "What do I do with you?" she whispered to herself. She didn't realize someone was standing behind her. "I thought I might find you here." A familiar voice said Dot. She spun around. Mr. Alden stood there, dressed neatly as always, but without the sharp attitude he had the night before. Her heart jumped, not out of excitement, but because she didn't expect to see him again so soon. "I didn't come to pressure you," he said quickly. "I know you need time. I just wanted to only talk." She hesitated, but nodded for him to continue. He took a step forward, but still kept respectful distance. "Last night, I offered you something big, and I know it can feel scary." Lena folded her arms, looking down. "I appreciate your offer. I don't know if it's right for me." He nodded. "I understand, truly." There was silence for a moment, and he said something unexpected. "Can I tell you a secret?" She looked up, surprised. He didn't seem like the type of person who shared secrets with strangers. "You changed something in me last night," he said quietly. "That music you played. It made me remember a part of myself I'd buried for years." She frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" He looked away for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "When I was younger, before I became the person people see now, I used to love painting. I wasn't great at it, but it made me feel alive. Then business took over my life. Money took over my life. I forgot what it felt like to create something, to feel something real." His voice softened. "Your music reminded me." Lena watched him carefully. He was being honest, painfully honest. "That's why I want to help." He paused. "Not to control you, not to make myself look good, but because I know how it feels to lose something you love. And I don't want you to lose it completely." Her chest tightened again. This time not from fear, but from understanding Dot. She finally asked, "What exactly would happen if I said yes?" He took a slow breath. "We would start small. Maybe find a good music teacher, someone who understands your style. Maybe book a recording studio for a day. No big commitments unless you choose them." She bit her lip. "And if I fail? If I'm not good enough?" "You've already proved you're good enough," he said simply. The whole room felt it. A long silence followed. Lena took a deep breath. "I'm scared." "I know," he replied. "But sometimes the things that scare us are the things that lead us where we're meant to be." She looked at the card again. His offer no longer felt like a trap. It felt like a door, one she had never expected to see open in her life. She didn't give him a yes. Not yet. But she didn't give him a no either. Instead, with quiet determination, she said, "Let me think about it one more night." He smiled gently. "Take all the time you need." He turned to leave, then paused. "Just remember your life doesn't have to stay inside the walls of this restaurant. You have something that deserves to be heard." Then he walked away. Lena stood there long after he was gone, holding the card tightly in her hand. For the first time since she had left music school, she felt something warm growing inside her, something she had nearly forgotten. Hope. Lena woke up the next morning earlier than usual. The sky outside her window was still a soft shade of gray, the kind of quiet morning light that made everything feel calm and thoughtful. She lay in bed for a long time, staring at the ceiling, listening to her own heartbeat. It felt different today. Not fast, not anxious, just steady. Like her body knew something important was coming. The card sat on her bedside table. She had placed it there the night before, after thinking for hours, after going back and forth between fear and hope. Even now, looking at it made her chest feel tight. It was only a small piece of paper, but it carried a weight that could shift her entire life. She sat up slowly, pressing her feet against the cold floor. She whispered to herself, "You need to choose. You can't stay in the middle forever." But choices weren't easy. Not when they had the power to rewrite your future. She went to the kitchen and made tea, the kind her aunt always told her helped calm the heart. She drank it quietly, watching steam rise from the cup. Then she showered, dressed for work, and tied her hair back the same way she did every morning. But today, something in her felt different. She didn't feel stuck. She didn't feel dull. She felt awake. When she stepped out into the cool air, she breathed deeply and walked toward the restaurant. With each step, she tried to listen to her inner voice, the one she had ignored for years, the one that used to dream. Work began like any other day. She greeted customers, served coffee, cleared tables, smiled politely. But her coworkers kept casting curious glances at her, as if they knew she was carrying a secret. The manager looked at her 2 or 3 times with an encouraging nod, like he was silently telling her, "Go for it." During her break, she sat outside on the small bench behind the restaurant, the card in her hand. She ran her thumb along its edges. She thought about everything the millionaire had said. She thought of her childhood, her father cheering from the living room during her home recitals. She thought of her teacher at music school, who once told her she had a gift that could touch hearts. She also thought of the fear of failing, of losing her job, of trusting someone who lived in a different world. But no matter how hard she tried to push away the hope, it kept returning to her mind, stronger each time. Her break ended, and she went back inside. She took a deep breath and kept working, but her thoughts continued swirling around the offer. When her shift finally ended that evening, the sky had turned a warm orange. She stood near the exit, her coat in her hands, unsure whether to turn left toward home or take a different path, a path that terrified and excited her equally. She looked down at the card again. This time she didn't hesitate. She pulled out her phone, entered the number slowly, and pressed call. Her hands trembled as the line rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Then a voice answered. "Hello." "This is Alden." She swallowed hard. "It's me?" "Lena." There was a pause. Then his voice softened. "I'm glad you called. Are you all right?" She nodded, though he couldn't see it. "I've been thinking." "A lot, I know," he said. "Take your time." But she didn't need more time. "Not anymore. I want to try," she said quietly. Another pause. A breath. Then warmth entered his voice. "You made the right choice. When can we meet?" "There's someone I want you to meet, a teacher. Very kind. Very patient." Lena felt a wave of nervousness wash over her. "Maybe tomorrow?" "That works," he replied. "I'll send you the address." "And Lena?" "You're going to be incredible." She ended the call and stared at her phone, her heart racing. She wasn't sure what she had just done, but something inside her felt light, almost glowing. She walked home that night with a strange mix of fear and excitement. When she reached her apartment, her aunt was sitting at the kitchen table, peeling fruit. She looked up with a smile. "You're home early." "Yeah," Lena said softly. "Can I talk to you?" Her aunt placed the fruit down, giving her full attention. Lena told her everything. The dare, the performance, the applause, the offer, the fear, the hope. Every detail. Her aunt listened quietly, eyes soft, hands resting on the table. When Lena finished, her aunt smiled gently. "You were born for music. I always knew it. I only worried that life would make you forget that." Lena felt tears rise in her eyes. "But what if I fail?" Her aunt laughed softly. "Fail at what? At trying? At returning to something your heart loves? If you don't try, that is the only real failure." Lena leaned forward, resting her head on her aunt's shoulder. She felt safe there, like she had when she was a child. The next morning came quickly. She dressed carefully. choosing clothes that looked clean and simple. She didn't want to look like she was pretending to be someone she wasn't. She checked her hair twice, not out of vanity, but because she wanted to feel presentable. Her phone buzzed with the address. A small music studio on the quiet side of town. She took a deep breath and left the house. The taxi ride felt long, even though it was only 20 minutes. Her mind replayed every possible scenario. What if the teacher didn't like her playing? What if she forgot how to read sheet music? What if her hands shook and she couldn't even press the keys properly? Her heart beat faster with every thought. When she reached the studio, she stood outside for a minute, staring at the small glass door. It had a simple sign that read, "Private music lessons." Her palms felt sweaty. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. She pushed the door open. Inside, the studio was warm and peaceful. The walls were lined with shelves full of sheet music. A soft carpet covered the floor. And in the center of the room sat a beautiful black piano, polished and shining under the soft lights. Mr. Alden stood near the window, talking to a woman with gentle eyes. She looked kind, calm, and carried herself like someone who had spent her whole life around music. When they saw Lina, they both smiled. "There she is," Mr. Alden said warmly. "Lina, this is the teacher I told you about." "This is," the woman stepped forward, cutting him off kindly. "Just call me Myra," she said in a warm voice. "I've heard a lot about you." Lina blushed. "I hope good things?" Myra laughed softly. "Only the best things." She guided Lina to the piano. "Why don't you sit? Play something small. Anything you remember." Lina hesitated. Her hands trembled as she sat down. The piano looked too perfect, too precious for someone like her. Myra noticed. She placed a gentle hand on Lina's shoulder. "You don't have to impress me," she said softly. "Just play what you feel." Lina nodded, inhaled deeply, and placed her fingers on the keys. At first, nothing happened. Her mind went blank, and she closed her eyes and let her fingers fall softly on the piano, pressing the notes of the melody she had written years ago, the one she played in the restaurant. The familiar tune rose inside the room, soft and honest. When she finished, silence filled the studio. Myra slowly nodded. "You play from the heart," she said. "That is something no teacher can teach. You already have the hardest part." Lina felt her breath leave her in relief. She looked up at Mr. Alden. He smiled proudly. "You see?" he said gently. "This is just the beginning." Over the next hour, Myra guided her through warm-ups, exercises, gentle corrections, and small bits of theory. Lina made mistakes. Yes, but Myra only smiled and helped her try again. For the first time in years, Lina didn't feel judged. She felt supported. By the end of the session, her fingers hurt a little, but her heart felt fuller than it had in a long time. As she stood to leave, Myra touched her arm lightly. "Come back tomorrow," she said. "Your story is just starting." Outside, the sun shone brightly. Lina stood on the sidewalk, feeling the warmth on her face. She looked up at the sky and released a slow, steady breath. She had chosen to try. She had chosen herself. As she walked away from the studio, she felt something she hadn't felt deeply in years, a sense of purpose, a sense of direction, a sense of belonging. Life hadn't magically become perfect. She still had rent to pay. She still had work. She still had responsibilities. But now, she also had something else. A chance, a new beginning, and somewhere deep inside her, she knew this was only the first step toward a future she once thought she had lost forever. She didn't know where the path would lead. She didn't know whether she would stand on a big stage one day, or record a song, or simply learn for the joy of learning. But she knew one thing for certain. She wouldn't let fear hold her back anymore. She walked with a small but confident smile. ready to face whatever came next, carrying her music in her heart like a gentle fire finally waking up again.